Make sure y'all tap into the Patreon. Link is in the description as well as pinned to the top of the chat. Also, on top of that, make sure that you guys get that Teach Hanley 30% off your first order plus a free gift. I want to go ahead and get into this video, and then we're going to let y'all go for the day. All right?
Picture this. You are an 18-year-old college freshman out navigating the world for the first time. Your weeks are filled with classes, studying, dorm food, annoying roommates, and your weekends, well, it's college.
Also, let me give a shout out to Fox Sports, Undisputed, all of the Fox family over there. I reached out to them and asked them, could I use their content? I'm not going to tell y'all how I got in touch with them, but they don't give me no problems. They said, Anton, you can use what it is that you want as long as you give us credit. Shout out to all of the different platforms, the bigger platforms, the Fox Sports, the ESPNs, and all of that, that allow for me to be able to use their copyrighted content. I reached out to them, and they absolutely love me and look out for me, including MSNBC, CNBC, and all of these different platforms. We going about doing it the right way. Thank you guys for allowing us to be able to use your clips and your platforms.
Your first steps into adulthood, independence, the whole world is ahead of you. Then it's all over.
Reading super chat shortly.
One day, someone walks into class and tells you, we're so sorry, but your school is closing.
You know, Laker was honestly the perfect fit for me. I wanted to learn more, wanted to be outside more, wanted to do more just for myself, wanted to create more. I say college just was kind of a family away from family, but I definitely had to.
Where's Lincoln College? I'm curious where Lincoln College is.
Learn things, be knowledgeable, you know, and that was honestly the fun part. Because I think if I would have went to a big university, I don't think I would have lasted. I'll be honest. I think the small settings and all that kind of was a good fit for me.
Lincoln,
in
Illinois.
2022, Lincoln College, a predominantly black private college in central Illinois, shut its doors for good, graduating its last class following a post-COVID drop in enrollment and a ransomware attack the small school just couldn't bounce back from.
We thought Lincoln had the money. I'm gonna be truthful. We thought Lincoln was a well-funded school. I'm very emotional. It was very emotional. I just lost a lot of family. I was very lost after that.
Would they consider Lincoln College a historically black college since it's been around for 157 years and it was a primarily or predominantly black college? You know, people don't really understand endowments. They don't understand recruiting. They don't understand funding. They don't understand tuition. They think that colleges are just flush with money and that they should be able to accept anybody. I had seen a previous live stream where Dr. Umar Johnson talked about how colleges need to grow their own food and then recruit from the inner community. They don't understand the importance of getting international students and how much tuition international students pay that then boost up enrollment and boost up the funds for them to be able to build new buildings and technology and run the school and then teachers. It's a whole ecosystem of finances that then come along with colleges, and people don't fully understand it because they don't understand the money.
After Lincoln closed.
This is happening more and more across America. The pace of college closures has picked up since the COVID-19 pandemic and could get even worse. Here's why. Lincoln College is one of 91 U.S. private nonprofit colleges that have shut down or merged with another school since 2016, affecting more than 60,000 students, just like Dion.
This is part of a larger trend that's been picking up since the mid-2010s, with private schools leading public schools on annual closures. That's not including private for-profit schools, which made up more than 80% of college closures from 2004 to 2020. That's an entirely different issue. For now, let's focus on nonprofit colleges and universities. Of those 91 schools, half of them closed during or after 2020, and a whopping 68% of them closed because of financial reasons, with one consistent issue popping up: enrollment.
There are two significant issues that are affecting higher education right now, specifically through the admission and enrollment offices. Number one, it is the admission cliff, and that is the impending decline. We'll be graduating our lowest high school classes by population in 2025. And most enrollment professionals have been wringing their hands about this date of 2025, but many schools have seen those enrollment declines already. With the downturn in the economy that happened in 2007, 2008, there were simply less people born, but they were less people born specifically in different regions of the country. The North.
I think that these school closures is actually a good thing. I know a lot of people probably would disagree with that, or a lot of people would say, no, 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 we need more schools, we need all of this other type of stuff. Like everything that happens within the economy that people don't understand, you adapt or die. And the market is the determining factor for whether or not your product should still exist or not. So, for example, you may have a whole lot of private colleges closing, uh, but that actually enables people to be getting a better education and then make adjustments to move into other universities to where they can actually staff more effectively. Or, for example, more or other universities, public universities, could accept more students because they have a better system and more capacity to actually take more online students depending on the type of enrollment that they have, right? And so when you see adjustments, one of the things that we have to learn to do in this economy is to let the economy itself determine who survives and who thrives. One thing that they can't do, and I'll give you another example of where that fails, or where we fail as a nation to let that happen, and why the government always steps in, is when they say that the banks are too big to fail, right? Because if you just let it naturally evolve, or attrition, you'll start to see tightening up of regulation, who it is that they lend money to, how it is that they utilize things. But instead, they know that they're too big to fail. They know that it's important for the American economy or American government to instill confidence in the banking system. And so they don't let it naturally contract and expand according to its market value or the true desire from the people of whether or not they need it. They don't let capitalism truly take its place, which is one of the reasons why Republicans and conservatives actually are advocating for smaller government, or for government to have a smaller footprint, because when you let capitalism naturally take its course with a little bit of regulation, within a certain guideline, you will start to see actual more growth. You'll see more building, more growth, more economy, more functionality. You'll start to see people naturally go over to the different cities that are more productive, and so on and so forth. But what you start to see, for example, and one of the reasons why it's so good when it comes to colleges closing, is because we had too many colleges raping students over the coals. And specifically when you have a private college, they didn't have as much regulation outside of getting accredited, and they could charge you whatever it is that they wanted, right? And so when students started to realize, or when the pandemic hit, or there's natural attrition, what happens is they start to move away from the things that's not best for them and make more informed decisions instead of taking on student loans. One of the reasons why the government, in my opinion, is not stepping in order to save a lot of these colleges is because the government is already under fire for forgiving student loans from a lot of these egregious universities that were overcharging you for liberal arts in the first place. And so even with colleges, right, there is still an economy, there is still a market, there is still money that is needed to be made. And a lot of people that have a vested interest in these colleges and these universities in order to make a lot of money as a result of you enrolling in it. And that's why it's so easy for you to get in some of these places instead of the prestigious places that will actually give you the better education and more opportunity to become more successful. But I got more on that in a minute. Let me continue.
Northeast, the middle Atlantic states, and the Midwestern states. Right now, the majority of brick and mortar colleges and universities are in those places, but the population of students are no longer there. So admission teams have to think about enrollment by strategy. 95% of the majority of four-year colleges in the country, particularly private.
The pandemic is not the problem. The pandemic exposed the problem. Let me say that again. The pandemic ripped the Band-Aid off a lot of these businesses, colleges, industries, and places that wasn't supposed to continue to be in existence in the first place. When you seen the pandemic happen, all it did was exacerbate the results that was already going to happen, or what was supposed to happen in the first place. As a matter of fact, I would even say that the pandemic was a blessing for eliminating the things that we didn't need. But then the government stepping in and giving a whole lot of incentives to businesses to then continue to stay afloat in order to try to justify and then continue to bolster the ranks of who was going to vote where, actually ruined what it was that we were supposed to experience so that we can get a market correction in every single industry that we lived in. Housing was overinflated, money became too cheap, and then that's when they started to having to raise the rates in order to continue to reduce inflation, because they did not let the market determine what was supposed to happen. They artificially created what it was that we had going on, which then created the thing that we suffering from today. When you don't let the market naturally correct itself, you are then going to suffer in the long run. And that's when they start talking about government shutdown, $31 trillion in national debt. You can't fix the problem as long as you continue to put Band-Aids over it and then try to do things in order to get people to continue to vote for you because you need to stay in power. The natural market correction in most situations needs to be the thing that we need to focus on, which is why we need smaller government, more conservative policies, and then to remove all of the barriers for people to continue to be successful. When you enable other people to then be able to become successful by removing the barriers to entry, you actually create a better system for capitalism, and then you just put the little barriers around it to prevent people from doing things that's the worst for other people that's then embracing capitalism also, including the consumers, right? You want to allow for people to sell stuff, but you don't want to allow for them to harm people. That's where the guardrails are supposed to be when it comes to capitalism. But when you start to control what capitalism is by then incentivizing people and pushing them to do certain things, then that's when you then mess up the market and you don't truly get real capitalism, which is why I said the system ain't perfect, all right? I need to be the one that's running government, not these imbeciles that's in government.
Schools, but many public schools as well, are 95% tuition driven. So the idea of enrollment driving finances and financial health of those schools is a given for most colleges and universities. So take one of those away, then take away the idea of enrollment being a given, then finances at that particular school are called into question. And then the end result of that is we see some schools closing, particularly private schools.
2023.
And there should be more. There should be more closing because we got too many schools ripping people off, giving them these stupid degrees that ain't actually add value into their life. And now the government is the ones that's going to have to pay for it because now we're in the Supreme Court talking about student loan forgiveness.
Added a new layer of financial stress for already struggling schools, the removal of federal stimulus money. In the original wave of pandemic stimulus bills, Congress passed $14 billion in relief funds for colleges and universities in what was called the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. Those grants.
When you think about these Pell Grants, right, and you think about student aid and all of this other type of stuff, remove the student loans. Let's just talk about the incentives from like Pell Grants and all of that. Where do you think that money come from? Who do you think paying for it? Why do you think taxes are so high? When we talk about social services and these social programs, it's not just relegated to welfare. It's not just relegated to people getting food stamps and EBT cards or, getting Section 8 housing or, us continuing to give money to these special needs and programs and all of this other type of stuff in order to keep these voters in place so that they can become dependent on the government titty. It's also the taxes that you pay that's then distributed in the form of Pell Grants and everything else that the government gives you. Every single incentive in which the government gives you money, it comes from somewhere else or somebody that they're taking it from and then redistributing it to other people. What we see America devolving into right now is a socialist country. It's more taxes, less access, more red tape, more barriers to entry, less preventing the market from determining what people really want. And then we're going to artificially stimulate it and juice it up so that we can then create more problems that we have to solve for later on down the road.
Grants must be spent by mid-2023.
Things are getting more and more challenging as the year progresses in terms of enrollment, in terms of operating performance, including the inflationary environment, labor market, you name it. It's a reflection of, I think, an unsustainable operating platform, meaning a heavy reliance on tuition, which can't always keep up with inflation. It can't always keep up with, erosion in enrollment, can't keep hiking tuition sticker price in the hopes that the net residual, once you account for scholarship and discounting and the like, is going to be enough to sort of offset your growing expense base. And so I think that's the internal piece that in many cases is unsustainable.
When I initially looked at it, the appeal of a small Christian liberal arts college in New York City was really high for me.
I got a chance to visit New York City and Kings the summer before my junior year of high school, and I fell in love with both the city and the school and had it be my top school of choice.
I don't even know what King's College is. I don't know where it is. I don't even know where these places are.
The quintessential New York college experience has also been
Okay,
incredibly fulfilling in the past 2 years as well. Whether it's going to Central Park on the weekends or finding that one really good local coffee shop to be my go-to study spot.
Remember those numbers we showed you earlier? More than 36 schools have shut their doors, merged, or announced plans to close since the pandemic. 20 of those schools were religious institutions. Since
Which they should, because anybody going over to get a theology degree is a problem too.
2016, 44% of college closures have been religious schools. While many were already struggling before 2020, COVID was the final push for many religious schools.
You see how I'm saying that the market is actually doing a correction, a positive correction? Every time something happens, every time that there's a recession, every time, and again, I encourage y'all, or I try to empower y'all in order to make the best decision and prepare yourself to capitalize off of the recession, because somebody is going to capitalize off of it. But every time that there's a correction in what's happening in society, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's a really, really good thing. And so y'all got to stop thinking that just because there's a correction that's an issue. It's an opportunity, and most people just can't capitalize off of it. It's no reason why we should have all of these religious institutions, especially higher education. I'll get more into that in a minute.
In financial trouble.
I had a little bit of a unconventional way of realizing, because I was on the editorial team of our independent student newspaper. A couple of stories started breaking where, for lack of a better idiom, I smelled blood in the water.
The King's College, a private Christian college in the heart of New York City, is yet another private school plagued with financial issues, enrollment declines, and bad business dealings that left it on the brink of closure. Last fall, the school started what it called right-sizing, laying off staff, closing down the student union, and selling off office spaces.
And it was stories like our singular on-campus property being put up for sale. It was a on-campus housing location in the financial district that I was slated to live in that next school year.
Then, in the spring of 2023, the school announced it would need $2.6 million to make it to the end of the semester.
And that's when you know that something is on the brink of disaster, when they start begging for money as a result of it. Let me say this, because I don't feel like I need to go through this entire video in order to justify what it is that I'm having a conversation about right now. College is not a bad thing. Trade schools aren't a bad thing. Whenever you're making a decision, because a lot of y'all have kids that's growing up. I have a 15-year-old daughter that's going into the 10th grade, and so, we've already kind of established, and we've been having that conversation since she was a little girl, about what her future looks like. And I don't want to discuss that on this live stream because it's not necessary. But let me say this. College is absolutely not a bad thing. It's a phenomenal thing, but you need to plan for it more effectively. You can minimize costs. You can, and it's not even necessary. I don't think that even taking out student loans are a bad thing. But what people get caught up in is the same thing that we get caught up in when it comes to materialism, when it comes to buying a home. It's the same thing that we get caught up in when it comes to credit. Most people just want to be in the game. It's a lot of young people today that only went to college because everybody else was going to college. And so they made the decision to go there, even the specific colleges that they went to. They made a decision to go there only because they were peer pressured into doing so. Some of y'all went to college, or it's a lot of y'all as parents that are proud of your kid because they're going to be the first person to go to college. That's not enough. That's the method from yesteryear to then justify how it is that we're operating today that may or may not be conducive for the direction of where your child needs to be. You're so proud of the idea that they're going to be the first person to go to college instead of the context as to what they're going to be studying when they go. Just because they go is not enough anymore. Going to college and getting a degree being the first person to graduate and all of that in order to get that degree on your wall and all of that other type of stuff. What's the goal? What's the long-term objective and the goal? And again, we can use the data and the statistics and we can say, okay, well, people that go to college historically make more than $1 million more than people that don't, right? True. But if you're going to go to college, which I do think you should go to college, it's a way in which you can go about doing it. If you don't get the scholarships, right? Maybe you shouldn't be going to a private college because this is more expensive. Maybe you need to start off at community college so you can do your core classes before you start getting into your true curriculum, right? Maybe you can go to a major university and afford it. Maybe it's important for you based off of what you're studying to be able to take out those student loans, but because you're going into a STEM field or because you're trying to become a practicing physician, or maybe you want to be a dentist, maybe you want to be an engineer, whatever it is that you want to be, maybe you can justify that, but then you have to have a strategy for when you come out of college or how much you're going to take on in student debt. Maybe you should be able to have a job, or maybe the curriculum is too strenuous for you to have a job, and so you do have to depend on those student loans in order to become successful. Student loans aren't necessarily a bad, as long as they're a true investment in your future. Don't overborrow, don't borrow more than you have to. Maybe you need to stay in state instead of out of state because the tuition is much cheaper for you to be able to do so. And so the conversations that we have can't be in a vacuum. We can't just say, oh, okay, well, student loans are bad or college is bad. It's not. It's not. The context by which we use these conversations in order to justify our actions or push our children, or the way that we were pushed into a specific field, it don't work that way no more. We need more understanding. We need more growth. We need more true conversations that allow for us to make the decisions that's in our best interest. And the only way that we're going to do that is to educate ourselves. It's like voting without truly understanding the policies of the candidates or what it is that they're going to implement and how it is that they can work with other legislative branches. Just because you voted don't mean nothing. It didn't mean that your vote didn't count. It just means that you operated out of ignorance and you weren't educated as to why it is that you were doing the thing that you were supposed to do in the first place. Just going to college is not enough. Just voting is not enough. Just getting a job is not enough. Just becoming or making $100,000 is not enough. It doesn't mean that you're not going to owe a lot in taxes. It doesn't mean that you don't understand the tax code and that you're going to be really taking home $67,000 a year after you make $100,000. And most people that make six figures are actually one paycheck away from being homeless. It's still true. The understanding the context and then having these conversations in its totality and not just depending on the idea of college or the idea of starting a business or the idea of voting or the idea of being a liberal or conservative, is always the understanding that allows for you to be more successful. So the more informed that you are, the better decisions that you can make. And then the more you can start asking the questions that you didn't even know that you needed to ask in order to better educate yourself as to the direction that you're supposed to be going or the direction that your children are supposed to be going.